Valentine's Day, everybody, and thank you for being here this morning for February 14, 2019 TDC meeting. Could please start with the Pledge of Allegiance? What'd you do? Stand up again.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. We have the clerk do the roll call, please. Here.
Holly Smith. Fran Myers. Cam Cronin.
Here.
Tony Loppy.
Here.
Colleen Pasquale.
Here.
Bob Lowe.
Here.
Bill Wetzulis.
Here.
Brian Kramer, Holly Smith, and John Periosha are excused.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you for everybody being here this morning. I know Holly is actually in D.C. with Kevin, Mayor Wayne, this week, so wish them well up there. Safe travels back. And we could have Nicole and Jason come up. We have some presentations.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting, and thank you as we are going to present today's Certified Guest Service Professionals from the Guest First program. So through our partnership with the American Hotel Lodging Education Institute, our destination is leading the recognition of Certified Guest Service Professionals. As year to date, we actually have a total of 739 Certified Guest Service Professionals in our community. So today, this morning, I get the opportunity to recognize our newly certified guest service professionals. And without this partnership with the American Hotel Lodging Education Institute in our community, the Guest First program would not be possible. And thank you to the community who has continuously hosted us to make this opportunity happen for our destination. So what I'm going to do, as I call your name, please come up, and we're going to recognize you with your certificate and your pen. So if Tam and Commissioner Pendergrass will come, please. All right. So from Casa y Bell Resorts, we have Caitlin D. Alessandro and Amy Speckman. Oh, come this way. Amy, come this way. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to start this way and then work our way down. From the city of Sanibel, we have Erica Briscoe. From Edison and Ford Winter Estates, we have Nancy Octor. We have Lars Kane. We have Larry Mendenhall. From Hertz Corporation, we have Samantha Simmons and Lori Slayton. From HMS Host, we have Alicia Moraro. From Holiday Inn Airport at Town Center, we have Irina Barachina. Mario Fertucci. From IMAG History Science Center, we have Carol Market. From Lee County Parks and Recreation, from our Bowditch Point, we have Tom Barnes, Daniel Coran, and Andrew Fortier. From Lee County Tax Collector, we have Blanca Esenero and Veronica Jackson. From Pink Shell Beach Resort and Marina, we have Erica Brown. From Sanibel Moorings Resort, we have Debbie Burkhart. Sanibel Siesta, we have Sarah Alexander, Karen Bricky, Patricia Frost, Paul Harmon, and Julie Smith. From Homewood Suites, we have Nicole Sastre. From Sea Gypsy Vacation Rentals, we have Aaron Burdett. From Seminole Casino Hotel, we have Miguel Pascual. From the Sundial Beach Resort and Spa, we have Kristen Bachel, Lori Brock, and Anna O'Connor. And at this time, I just want to make sure that I was able to recognize all our certified guest service professionals. Is there anyone here that did not get recognized today? All right. So before we conclude this presentation, we put out a challenge to have our destination be certified guest service properties and partners with the American Hotel Lodging Education Institute. And today I would like to present Lee County Parks and Recreation, the Bowditch Point. All of their team was certified guest service professionals, and they have received this recognition of the plaque. So please come up. They're our first Lee County Parks and Recreation to do this. So again, thank you so much for all your hard work.
Okay, that picture.
Come up out of the, you
Come
guys
up
are
real
in the,
far.
Yes,
there we go.
Thank you.
Nicole, you're in too.
Come on. There you go.
Beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you again. This concludes our presentation.
Pretty good. Pretty fast, too. Glad I got here early. I didn't have trouble
Congratulations, everybody.
Is that guy still parked up at 4 spots with one camera?
Well, probably Parks and Recreation. I don't know. Could have been. Wasn't me. I got here early. And I
No, I need some.
called Renee, though, and I said, Renee, I'm missing one of the best ones.
Saw them unloaded off the truck and I was laughing.
No place to find.
Thank you. What a way to start the day off with all good news and everybody getting recognized for all the great service here in Lee County.
Yeah.
So thank you. And next we'll need a motion to approve the January 10th, 2019 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Fran, second by Pam, or Tony, who was next. Any other discussions on the item? Any objections? No objection, motion carries. Thank you. And we'll next have public comment. At this time, we'll call public comment. Anyone would like to be heard, please, from the public? Yes, sir. Let's come to the podium.
Good morning, Jack Carver with the Florida RV Trade Association. Just informing council that we finished up our 34th annual Fort Myers RV show last month. Despite the rain, rained on Thursday morning heavy, and rained all day Sunday heavy, which I think everybody knows record rains. But nevertheless, we still drew over 10,500 patrons, had great turnout irrespective of the rain, a lot of sales, a lot of interest. So the RV lifestyle is well and good in Lee County. Our next event will be at the Lee County Sports Complex middle of April, and I invite everybody to come out. It's free admission, and it should be a good time if the heat holds off. But it'll be another opportunity to portray what we offer for the RV lifestyle in Florida. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other public to be heard at this time? Okay, we have municipalities to be heard. Any cities to be heard? Judy? Morning.
Show and tell.
Take one and pass it on.
Want to pass it
All right.
if you don't mind?
I don't mind.
There's three different documents.
Three different things.
Three different documents.
One, two, there we go.
Yeah. I'll take one.
You got one? Okay,
Yep.
good. Those, these.
Good morning and happy Valentine's Day, Commissioners. Good morning. Good morning. Anyone out there? Good morning, my name's Judy Zamomer. I'm the city manager of Sanibel, and first, as the commissioner mentioned, Holly Smith, our city council member and representative here, is actually in Washington, D.C., and I know as of yesterday they had been able to visit 17 members of Congress that represent Florida, so it's been a very successful trip, and met personally with both of the senators, primarily on water quality, which is very important to all of us. This is the time of year, of course, on Sanibel. I've been there 18 years. This is my 18th season, not as long as Tony, but have a sense of the seasonal fluctuations we have on the island. And so some people call it peak visitation. We call it peak traffic management season at the City Hall. And we're in full bore. We've done some things over the last few years to really increase our traffic management component of our municipal government. One that we have received extremely positive feedback about is our Sanibel Map-bound traffic app. We have 2 free traffic apps, one on Android and one on Apple. Very easy to access. And based on the feedback we received from our visitors and residents, we now have 5 intersections with 12 cameras where you can go on and live see what time and what the traffic conditions are. Second, we passed out, the City of Sanibel received with the MPO a grant to study our shared use path system. You may recall, I know Councilmember Smith announced a few weeks ago here that we are selected as one of the only 2 gold level bike path systems and shared path systems in the United States, and in the state of Florida, in a national program. And through this grant, we're right now soliciting public comment. We have a survey. The first 2 days, over 660 people took the survey. So we certainly would welcome input from those who visit the island, those who live in Lee County and don't come to the island every day, as well as those who work there. So information on all of those items, and of course if you're biking. And then finally, we welcome Mr. Talmadge to the table, a long-time co-worker, friend, and past Planning Commission member of Sanibel that's had a tremendous impact on all of our success on Sanibel. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other cities like to be heard? Okay. Move on to the report of the Executive Director, Cameron.
Okay, before I give my report, I would like to welcome our newest intern. Her name is Serena Vargas, and she is working with our communications team. Serena, why don't you stand up? I want to say some nice things about you, okay? She's going to help them, of course, with press trips and news releases and our database, and assist also in planning Island Hopper Songwriter Fest. She's a junior at FGCU, majoring in communications with a minor in digital media design and interdisciplinary studies. She's a member of the Honors College at FGCU and a member of the Phi Mu sorority, and she likes volunteering, spending outside, enjoying all the things we have to do here in our local community. She was born in Milwaukee and grew up in Orlando, and she went to Lake Brantley High School in Altamont Springs. So we are super happy to have Serena on our team. So welcome her. So let's look at the numbers. I'm really excited. I get to tell you we have an increase for December. It's a tiny one, but it is an increase. And I think it's important to remember that, last December we were still benefiting some from the cruise from the hurricane. So I think that this is really good news, big picture. And then for the year-to-date, this is fiscal year-to-date, I want to be clear, October through December. Next slide. We were down 7.9%, but if you'll remember, that was about 15% last month. So look how quickly that has changed, because we had a good month in December. So the first 3 months of the year, down 7.9%. I will remind you that last year at this point, we were up 15.5%. So when you compare this number to 2016, which would be a more normal year, we're up 8.6%. Similarly, looking at the STAR report, you see occupancy for December was down 6.3% Very little change in ADR, 0.03% down, for a RevPAR difference of 9.2. Amanda, do we have that other slide? That's what I was thinking. We wanted to compare it to 2016. There we go. So just so you can see where we were in 2016 for December, not looking at 2017, but 2016, you'll see occupancy is actually up, ADR is up almost $6 for a RevPAR increase of 97.8. So I think it's important to put that in context. Passenger count at the airport up significantly, almost 10%, 958,000, almost 959,000. And for the year, up 6% at 9.3 million. So things are definitely cranked out at the airport.
I think Carol said, thank you, Carol and Jeff, for all your work out there at the airport.
Absolutely. And now I would like to present Bob Dominy from DPA to present the fourth quarter report, which as I had to remind myself when I looked through it, it's now behind us, which is a good thing.
Good morning. Thank you, Tam. Yes, the fourth quarter is now behind us. It's Valentine's Day. The sun is out again. Everybody has a smile on your face. So we're going to move through this sort of last round of not so good data, and the world is going to be perfect ever after. That's a prognostication, not a research data point. As usual, we'll look through seasonal highlights, calendar year highlights, then we'll look at the lodging industry summary, satisfaction measures, and then finally the outlook for Q1. Seasonal highlights, again, this is, I think, the last time that I'm going to be standing here making this report to you, and it pains me greatly that all of those arrows are red and pointing downward, but then I view this as a gift that I'm giving personally to the next fellow who stands here, because likely his are all going to be pointing upwards in green. And that's okay. That's all good. Visitation for the fall season down about 5%. Expenditures and those in lodging, again, down both about 5%. Available room nights up 5%. And when we look at the detailed numbers, we see that's primarily because of increases that we got through doing a lodging inventory last year, and a lot of those are actually campsites. Occupied room nights, of course, down 5%, average occupancy down 10, and ADR just off 1, but RevPAR down by 11.3, which of course you would expect with the increase in available room nights. Visitation for the fall season, despite showing a decline in 2018, estimated visitation among fall visitors staying in paid accommodations has increased over 2014. And often we don't take the long view. We always encourage people to do so. The 5-year change is still 5.3%. You've had your issues with the hurricane on the fall of 2017, with the red and green tides. We sincerely, on your behalf, hope this is all a blip and that things will continue sort of on the upward trend that they were before that. Okay. And then on to visitor expenditures. I can't look down at the same time that I click, because then I think I'm on the same slide. You'd think I'd learn that. Visitor expenditures, again, experiencing a slight drop in 2018. Estimated spending among fall season paid accommodation guests has shown an overall rising trend. So again, taking a long view, expenditures among those staying in paid accommodations up 17.6% over that 5-year period, and among all visitors up 9%. So the bottom line is, despite the issues with which you've been grappling, long story, things continue to improve here in Lee County. Paid accommodations, visitor origin. We can't get away from it. Based on our data collection season after season, certainly this is borne out in the fall, an increasing proportion of visitors are coming from the U.S. and a decreasing proportion from abroad. Looking at international, Canada, you can see over 5 years has dropped from 7 to 4%, Germany 13 to 4, UK 9 to 2. Can I explain this? I'm not so much in the data explanation business as I am in the data collection and aggregation business. If I had to guess, I would say that what we see in other places where Canadian tourism is extremely important, my home state of Maine, that as soon as the exchange rate became highly unfavorable to Canadians, they stopped coming to Maine or started coming and staying for a much shorter period of time. I would think back to my own European travels and when the exchange rate started to flip-flop with the euro, that very much the same things could have happened. It's a lot easier to go to the Mediterranean and use the same currency than it is to come across the pond and have to start exchanging. Tam?
And just to add a little bit to that, I mean, obviously Germany in particular, you know, new airline service, new paths to learn, so to speak, for our travelers to our area. So I think, you know, we're working our way through these challenges, and I think we're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But certainly, I know my travels to Europe are less expensive right now than they were a few years ago, and I think, you know, so that means it's more expensive for them to come our way. But, you know, there's still great passion in it. We'll be at ITB in a few weeks. Working very hard on that German market. I don't think they've lost their passion for us. I think they've had some mild weather and some of the exchange rate issues. But, you know, we've all been in this business long enough to see some of those fluctuations. I'm confident that will come back over time. Commissioner will be joining us also at ITB.
And just remember, she said that. I like to have fun with you guys. Paid accommodations, domestic visitor origin for the fall season. Pretty much what you would expect. Midwest kind of still hangs on to that top slot. Of course, you get a lot from right here in Florida, and then Northeast. And then looking at the top domestic feeder markets, New York, Philadelphia, and then let's skip down to Chicago, Cincinnati, Detroit, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Boston, Indianapolis, and then back here to Atlanta. Calendar year highlights. I was thrilled that we got to do the year as a whole as part of this presentation because I got some arrows pointing up that are green. And again, the importance of the long view, even over the total year as opposed to a single season, things were not quite as bleak. Visitation was up a little bit. I don't even know that that's statistically significant, but certainly visitation was flat over the whole arc of the year. Expenditures, again, at least flat. And lodging expenditures, the arrow's pointing down, but minus 0.2%, at least flat. So what feels cataclysmic, and what I'm sure is cataclysmic for some individual property owners in total over a longer arc of time, is maybe not quite as bad. Again, looking at inventory, available room nights up 6.5% over the whole year. Much of that due to a new lodging inventory. Occupied room nights, again, up 2.6%. Average occupancy, that, you know, now we start to get the things pointing down, but then we do that because of the changes in inventory as much as anything else. Average daily rate down slightly, RevPAR down a little more. Visitation calendar year, January through December. Again, the good news is over the long arc of time, your 5-year change is positive. It's pretty much flat, but positive, I would say. Total visitation, 5-year change down just a little bit. Visitor expenditures, and again, this is where the money hits the road, I guess. Estimated visitor spending continued to climb during 2018, despite what we saw with visitation. We get just a little bit of a bump from 2017 to 2018. The 5-year percent change, again, is 15%. And then paid accommodations, visitor origin. For the whole calendar year, we're seeing very much the same thing that we saw just for the fall. and the explanations would be the same, which is an increasing proportion appears to be here from the domestic market, and that Canada, Germany, UK all look very similar to what they looked like in the fall, though frankly if we were to flip back, the fall looks like that situation has been exacerbated a little bit. I don't know if that fits with your individual experiences, but that's certainly what the data we collect looks like. I will say that this entire method of interviewing or of estimation that we use for you has always been based on face-to-face interviews with travelers, which we strongly believe in as the very best possible way to get profiles of expenditures. The unfortunate effect of the tide situation and the lack of people at the beach is the pattern of interviewing, by definition, had to shift. You couldn't stand at the beach and talk to anybody. And so I think that some of the fluctuation that you've seen, not only in the fall but in the previous summer, has to do with the fact that in order to continue interviewing at all, the locations were slightly different. And of course, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to figure out how much of that fluctuation comes from that changing pattern of location interviewing. And it's just important to remember that we are estimating its broad trends over time that are reliable more than individual single numbers. Paid accommodations, domestic origin, Midwest, started at about half, looks like it's declined a little over time, but it continues to generate the largest share of domestic visitors for Lee County in 2018. The top feeder markets, of course, New York at 6%, Chicago at 5%, and Boston at 5%. Lodging industry summary. Available and occupied room nights for the fall season. I've talked about this on two of the earlier slides. The available room nights have steadily gone up over this 5-year period. And obviously for the calendar year, that's reflected in available room nights having gone up for that 5-year period. You all know there's been a fair amount of building, a lot of campgrounds opening, inventories have been refined, and so we would basically expect to see available room nights increase. Fortunately, we're also seeing essentially occupied room nights increase, certainly over this long arc of time, and then of course right there, that's not the surprise. That's the red arrow is pointing down. Occupancy rate trends, all property types combined. Average occupancy rate during the fall 2018 season declined, and for the calendar year as a whole, though for the 5-year period, we still showed growth for the fall season of 3.5%, and about the same, 3.4%, for the calendar year as a whole. ADR trends, all property types combined. Average daily rate over this, for the fall season over the 5-year period, up 3.3%. For the calendar year as a whole, up 3.7%. So the good news with this slide, in thinking about everything in the presentation, which I can't show all the slides at once even if I wanted to, but you've had this increasing inventory over this long period of time. You've had a couple exogenous events over which you have no control that have really kind of, dealt you a punch. Notwithstanding all of that, the bottom line is average daily rates have continued to go up for both the season and for the calendar year as a whole. So, I mean, that's great. RevPAR trends, all property types combined. Again, very much the same story. Over the long arc, 7% increase 2014 to 18, and again over a 7% increase for the calendar year as a whole, from 86.34 in 2014 to 92.55 in 2018. And again, remember, this is all property types combined, so whenever you're comparing this information to the STAR report, which you always see that data just before you see this data, it's always going to be a little different because the STAR report is that segment of properties, and what we're doing here is attempting to capture your entire tourism economy. That seems bad.
Well, it was pretty bad.
Okay. Right. We actually programmed that into our presentations just before we get to really horrible things. The thing just goes poof. I'm kidding again. I just keep having to tell you when I'm kidding. Visitor satisfaction. The tremendous news is among those people who come to Lee County, even in that fall season, they're very satisfied. Satisfaction with the visit, 93 to 94, flip-flopped a little from extremely to very, but overall, we have satisfaction. Quality of accommodations, from 95 to 97%. People are very happy with the paid accommodations that they're staying in. Least liked features, nobody ever likes the traffic, and we joke about that in every one of these meetings. Nobody likes the red tide, and nobody likes the beach seaweed. So no surprises here, but it's always nice to see exactly how it translates into numbers so that you guys know it's not anecdotal, it's very real. Likelihood to recommend, boom, 86, 87. Boom, 90 to 92. And 53% of those who are likely to return say they're coming back next year. So you have a great product, people come here, they have a great time, they're going to come back, and they're going to tell their friends. Didn't we just do this? Visitor satisfaction with fall season, satisfaction with the visit, extremely high, quality of accommodations, great. I just have to look at this. Satisfaction for the fall season, satisfaction for the fall season. Yeah, let's just talk about this one. Huh. That's incredible. I think this is probably year as a whole, and those 1,700 of us actually looked at this, we never caught that. Anyway, outlook for the first quarter of 2019. This is where the pessimism comes into play. Half of property managers report their reservations for January through March for 2019 are up versus the same period of last year. That's a lower proportion than last year. So we have half of the lodging managers telling us reservations are up as compared to what we were told in 2017. So there's where we're getting, well, I mean, it's interesting because it's in some sense a report of the reality on behalf of the people we're talking to, that they're experiencing a sense that reservations are down. On the other hand, I think it's a little bit of a reflection of the fact that it's been hard for 6 to 9 months. And, you know, we're not just willing to say it's over yet and we can move on and be as optimistic as we might want to be otherwise.
I think, you know, also just to add a little bit to that, I went to the board meeting of the Lee County chapter of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association yesterday, and there was a lot of talk about last-minute bookings, right? You know, in week for the weekend, in week for the in day for the day, and you know, it's hard when you're looking at your PACE report and you're behind and you're completing the survey in January, but that may or may not be the reality of what happens given some of those last-minute bookings. Would those of you in the, I mean, I'm looking over there where all the hoteliers are, agree with that? I mean, do you think that much of that is, does it seem like the booking window is, for the first quarter is shrinking? I mean, used to be the booking window for first quarter was a lot longer, right?
No, it's much more shorter.
Yeah.
It's I mean, within 2 weeks, really what we're seeing, heavy bookings still. So as long as the flights are available, they're still booking.
Rob?
I'm assuming, and I feel the same way, I'm assuming the downside of that is that they have more of an opportunity to opt out if they see a bad weather forecast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it might be that that's a harder thing to overcome if we get a blip.
Right.
But we saw the same thing. It was sort of alarming how many people were booking for very last minute for these reservations and how fast things filled up.
Yeah, and you know, I anticipated that January would be a little softer. Every time we have a late Easter, I hear from many of you, not all of you, that January is a little soft when Easter is so late. And I know when I talked to Bill yesterday, he said not the case at Pink Shell. He had a really strong January, but
No, we were flat.
oh no, you were flat.
We were
okay.
flat January, and but February, March, April, it's looks good. I mean,
Right.
it's, bookings are strong.
Sure. I think it's just, depends, it's different from property to property, and I understand that, but I did hear January's a little soft. That might also play into the optimism for the quarter as well. We'll see.
So that is it for the fall season 2018 and for 2018 as a whole. And just when you thought you were finished with me, I think I'm coming back in a few minutes. To
You are.
Spring training, so I'm looking forward.
You will.
to that. See you in a few minutes.
All right. Be continued.
Great. Well, next, Jeff Milkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, council. I'm not used to being at the grown-up table, so it's kind of like a stray cat being brought into the house. But we're going to wrap up basically our 2018 season going through October through December, and then we'll talk a little bit about our end-of-year 2018 annual report, which has got some really good news in it. So as we go through October, you look at our traditional PowerPoint presentation that you've all seen. Hotel room nights sold in October, 15,237, with a direct visitor spending of $7.3 million. Most of that did come from two major events, which were Perfect Game, World Wood Bat Underclass, and their Sophomore Worlds. We also hosted a couple non-traditional events that we like to point out, just to let everyone know we're not just baseball and softball and soccer here. Netball, and we had a state BMX event, which brought in quite a few room nights. We're trying to bring sports business to this community as well, and every once in a while you see a conference or convention pop up, and this is something that Gary Ewan worked really hard on over the years. It took many years to get this event, but we hosted NSA National Convention, which is a national softball organization, so that was one of our October success stories. Next slide, you'll see the trend bar. It was up there as one of our better Octobers in our last 7-year snapshot. Going to November, hotel room nights sold 24,000, almost 25,000, with a direct visitor spend of $13.2 million. Again, mostly from a couple major events during that time of year. One, the Roy Hobbs World Series, which continues to grow incrementally, and then Senior Softball USA, which is almost 5,000 room nights. Did want to point out, we're starting to become really well known as a basketball destination. We have a lot of state championships in the spring or early summer, which would be May and June, and then in November we had 3 events. 2 of them were marquee events. One of them was an AAU basketball youth event. Then at the same time, at Hertz Arena, we were hosting the Gulf Coast Shootout, which featured 16 collegiate teams, 8 men's and 8 women's programs. The women's program were all major D1 institutions. Duke was here, Missouri was here, University of Michigan was here. And then we welcomed for the first time our inaugural Fort Myers tip-off at the Suncoast Arena, which you heard about a little bit at the December TDC meeting, but that featured 4 collegiate teams as well and has a pretty strong slate for next year. So just wanted to recognize those basketball events in November. And then for the first time also, we hosted the FHSAA Girls Volleyball State Championships, which, as you all know, we've been hosting the boys baseball for many years. So now this is adding a second high school state championship to our mix, which is, I think, accomplishment for our area, because FHSAA tends to want to have these state championships in centralized locations in Florida, just due to the travel inequality from teams from the Panhandle having to travel so far. And so I think having 2 state championships is not only a testament of our destination as far as facilities, but it's also for the team that puts them on, the customer service, the way that FHSAA, we overheard a gentleman tell FHSA leader that this was one of the best state championships he'd ever been a part of, so we were proud of that. Trend line for November, again, right up there, looks similar to most of the past years, but going to December, 10,000 room nights sold with a direct visitor spending of almost $4 million. Basketball, again, the City of Palms Basketball Classic, John Naylor's product that everyone in the room knows about, was very successful this year. Just another couple events to mention, FYSA, which is Florida Youth Soccer, had 2 or 3 Olympic development soccer programs in town that month, and USA Softball had their fall states. And trend line for December is a little bit down from last year, but the 2 years I just want to point out, 13 and 14 were state senior games years, and we're in the discussions of having the state senior games come back. So if they do, you'll see some spikes in our December business. All right, 2018 highlights. This is what our team's really excited to announce. We've never surpassed 160,000 room nights in a year. 2014 was our best year ever, and I think we were at 159. So 163,000 room nights, that's an 8.5% increase over last year. Direct visitor spending, $72 million. So that's $72 million that are being generated in this community through amateur sports. And we're going to talk about spring training in a minute and how much spring training brings to our destination. But then to add $72 million of activity that most people are largely unaware of this happening, it's kind of stealth impacts in our community, is a good story to tell. We increased the number of annual events from 144 to 158 this last year. And I don't know if you'll recall back early in 2018, I think it was a spring TDC meeting, we announced that January, February, March, and April all were record-setting months. So really those were the 4 months that carried this new number. And I listed 2 of the key events to that, the USA Figure Skating event that was last January, a huge impact for us, and the Pepsi Youth Bowling event, which also had a great impact. And then I did mention already the Fort Myers tip-off. And instead of, on the next slide, instead of showing a 7-year trend line, because if you looked at the last 7 years, it largely looks the same, we did a 10-year, because I want to remind everybody about where we've come from and show the growth. And, reminder that in 2012 is when we added some parks facilities and we opened JetBlue Park. And, we opened those facilities and, a new level we were able to enjoy. So just wanted to give a quick snapshot of just kind of where we've come from. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recognize the group of people who really were largely responsible for this amazing year that we had. So I'm going to call out some names. If you guys would kind of jump up to the front, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. From the sports development team, we've got a really solid group of folks, and we've been together for a long time. Connie Buchanan, you can head towards the front. Gary Ewan, where's Gary? Angel Natal joined us recently. This is the sports development team. They're the ones who are, Gary and Angel largely going out and it's the sales efforts. Gary, how many years you have now? 35 now with the county? He's got more than that, but yeah. So it's a seasoned group of folks, and they do a really good job. Assisting us also, Allison Gruber with the Sports Organizing Committee. Most everyone in the room knows that Sports Organizing Committee is a partner of ours, and we work really hard with them to house all of these teams that are coming into our destination. And then there's a really key group of folks who are largely unsung heroes, but we like to bring them up every few years. Jesse and Elise, why don't you kind of come on up as the band leaders of the Parks and Rec team. And I'm not going to forget about Kim. She just wanted to wave from the seat, so wave, Kim. But Jesse and Elise have been so supportive of sports tourism over all of these years. And they have a manager, Bob Green, where's Bob, who oversees a group of incredibly hard athletic coordinators who really are the ones who are operating our events day to day. So as Bob walks up, I'd like to call Chris Williams, even though he's not with athletics anymore. He was with us almost all of 2018. So Chris Williams, Ludi Adorno. Yep. Mackenzie Vance wasn't able to join us today, but Sergio Perez. Another Adorno by the name of Nick. And Jennifer Hamill. Apperson, why don't you jump up there too? Nancy Apperson runs all of our aquatics and swimming events for us. So I just want to say thank you from myself and from this team and on behalf of our tourism world. You guys are the ones that put on these events. You're out there on the weekends. You're working 50 and 60, 70, 80-hour weeks sometimes during the summertime. You're dealing with rain. You're dealing with angry customers. You all have been in part of the Guest First program. You guys are all customer service champions when it comes to taking care of our visitors when they come to town. So I just wanted to call them up and say thank you for a record-breaking year.
Jeff,
Did I forget anybody? I don't think so.
Jeff, I just want to say thank you to all your staff and all the county employees, because, I mean, hopefully them being here today, they see these numbers and see how much impact they have on people's lives, not just the visitors, but also the local hotelers and the local economy, how much they impact our local economy, because what they're doing every day makes a big difference here. I mean, you see hundreds of thousands of rooms being occupied, people here on vacation, here for sports events, creating family memories together, and our staff is part of that. So thank you for everything they do every day.
Are there any questions on my report?
One question. I don't know what netball is.
Netball. Where's
Somebody
Gary?
explain to me what netball is.
Gary's in charge of netball. Netball is basically an event that's being played in mostly other countries, Latin America and Europe, and it's a hoop that does not have a backboard. So it's essentially kind of basketball without a backboard, correct?
No dribbling.
No dribbling?
No dribbling.
No dribbling.
No dribbling. So I think we've
Learned
hosted,
something today.
what, three netball events now, and we're working on hosting some international events on their behalf. So, also, just want to mention as we're preparing for our next presentation, I just want to remind everybody, in 2009, we did our first ever spring training study. And in 2009, it came out as a $48 million economic impact. That was direct visitor spending. Those were people who were in the ballpark primarily due to the spring training product that we have here in this community. We have amazing partnership with the Minnesota Twins and Boston Red Sox organizations. And we thought that it was time to probably update the study. In 2009, the Twins hadn't undergone their facility renovations, and the Red Sox were still at City of Palms Park. So both of them have moved into new digs, if you will. Their fan bases are better than ever, and I just wanted to mention that as we go into the next presentation. So,
You have a question?
thank you.
Bob?
I didn't know what netball was. Did you know? I got that trying to visualize.
Okay. 2018 spring training impact. The last conversation was something you're used to seeing. It was basically a tracking report that you see every quarter, and sometimes I go through fairly briskly because you've seen it many times and are familiar with it. I'm going to take a little bit more time on this because, as Jeff said, we haven't really seen this for a number of years now. Primary objective estimate the economic impact of non-residents, that is visitors, who attend spring training games. And then additional objectives, estimate the number of visitors who come to Lee County specifically to attend spring training, explore the effect of spring training on attendees' first-time visitation, on their repeat visitation, and even in home purchase decisions, profile the visitors attending spring training and their overall travel, and compare and contrast the visitor profiles and economic impacts of the two teams now holding spring training in Lee County. There's a lot there. This study accomplished a lot. There's more in the full report than can possibly be in this presentation, but all of these objectives were addressed. Most of this presentation will sort of focus on the top half. It was done using on-site interviews at JetBlue Park and CenturyLink Sports Complex. We were there, I believe, for every single game. Non-resident attendees at all home games and 6 practices. And I had to be coached in understanding how to, how to do the initial part of the screening on the survey itself. That is the part that our interviewers actually conducted before they turned the interview. There's a very complex logic in making sure that we were only talking to visitors and not to residents who happen to go out to a baseball game for the day. We received a total of 1,183 interviews. Usable questionnaires, 1,183, basically evenly split between the two parks, so they're both well representative. Residents, we discovered, were about 25% of attendees. Visitors, about 75%. And then based on the attendance data provided by the Red Sox and the Twins themselves, that puts the visitor population at about 208,000 that attended spring training games.
Bob, just go back. The snowbirds would fall into residents?
It's a complex definition, and I would really urge you to go to sort of the full report and look at it, because it's a certain length of time that you're here, and when you just say snowbird, if I were to say yes, I might be talking at either side of the cutoff for what we call a snowbird and what we call a resident. Spring training attendees are slightly older than the general winter visitors to Lee County. Average age, 57 years. That's the Lee County general winter visitors. For spring training attendees, average age is 60, a tiny bit younger for the Red Sox, and a tiny bit older for the Minnesota Twins. Across the board, average travel party size looks about the same. That is around 3. Traveling with children, we see 24% general Lee County winter visitors. It appears that slightly more are traveling with children, travel parties with children, among those attending spring training games. And certainly that's true for the Red Sox. And then across the board, average household income appears to be just over that $100,000. So that appears to be sort of a magic number for visitors in general. Yes?
The average age of visitors, the 6.9, does that include children in the party?
I think it does. It's an important thing about the way all of this research is done is that it's focused on travel party as opposed to being focused on the individual. The reason for that is if you approach somebody and you say, how much did you spend? Right. Well, half of the people think, well, I guess that means me. And half of the people think, well, I guess that means me and my kids because I paid for everything. And so we focus on travel party to get a profile of how much did your travel party spend yesterday. Well, then we ask them, who's in your travel party? And we get a profile of who's in the travel party, which allows us to get then a profile of age, a profile of travel party size, and then an accurate per capita expenditure, because everybody we talk to knows that we're talking about travel party, and then we can reliably divide that by travel party size to get individual expenditure profiles, if that makes sense.
It does make, well, because the number looked low to me, so the age.
Right.
Low, so I assumed that children were.
Right.
Thank
We talked about this yesterday. We had a lot of fun with this. Nearly half of those attending spring training games in Fort Myers came to the area only for spring training, 41%. 41%. And then for more than once a year coming to Lee County was, as you can see, quite a bit lower. Once a year, about the same. Every other year, pretty small. Less than every other year, about 13%. The key thing here, nearly half of those attending spring training games, when we profile these people, came to the area only for spring training. Without spring training, you might not have them as visitors. So this is very important to the tourism economy at that particular time of year. Primary reason for the trip, again, half of spring training attendees said that spring training was the primary reason for their visit. To attend spring training, 50%, and then depending on interview location, slightly more for Red Sox, slightly less for the Twins. And then if you look down the list, primary reason goes from attending spring training, a big drop to general leisure or pleasure trip, then a big drop again, visiting friends and relatives. And around the office, we kind of kidded each other and said that most of those people were just fibbing and saying, you know, yeah, I really would like to come down and visit you for a few days, but they really wanted to just go to spring training. So we don't have any way to ask them that question. Length of stay and accommodations. 70% of spring training attendees stayed in Lee County for at least one night. Average length of stay, 5.1 nights. Red Sox a little less, Twins a little more. 71% stayed in paid accommodations while attending spring training. So they're exactly the sort of visitors that we want. Hotel, motel, 37%. Vacation home or condo, 24%. 48% stayed in Fort Myers. And that's interesting. 70% in Lee County, 48% in Fort Myers, and then a number of others, of course, who are visitors attending spring training games and are not staying in the immediate areas, but of course you would expect that. They're in Florida, they're fans of one team or the other.
So you're saying Fort Myers, the city limits, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in fairness.
Okay.
I think that's what they reported when they were asked what city they were staying in. They picked Fort Myers. You know, I think
They could be in Estero, they wouldn't
in
know the difference.
fairness, that's their response to that question, which city did you stay in? And which I think sometimes we get hung up on our city limits, but our visitors really don't know our city limits.
Makes sense.
They don't realize that Boy Scout it stops southbound.
Technically, Daniels Road isn't in Fort Myers, the city limits, but you would say you're in Fort Myers.
Neither know that neither is Whole Foods or anything else, anything south of Boy Scout on 41 is in the county.
The important thing here is intent to return to Lee County. Spring training attendees expressed strong intent to return to Fort Myers for spring training next year and future years. Visitors' intent to return for reasons other than spring training was also relatively strong. But the bottom two boxes here, those are the big numbers. That is for 2019, 66%. Basically, definitely or probably will return. 2020 and beyond, 63%. And you know, so you can see it's a very strong driver among basically your loyal customers. And it's important to get that information out of a survey like this every few years, just to again revisit how important that is. Direct dollar impact, average expenditures per person per day. On average, spring trainees, attendees spent $161 per person per day. And this includes expenditures in the park. Of that, $107 was spent outside the ballpark. We collected that information in the previous study and in this study. This time, after great discussion and debate, including in a draft report and ultimately in the final report, we chose to actually share that information. That is that $161 per day is everything including in-park, $107 outside of the park. The rationale for that is that while strictly speaking, maybe it's true that those in-park expenditures are gathered together and put in an envelope and under lock and key sent to Minneapolis or to Boston, they actually come back to this economy in some way, because everything that happens inside that park is actually done by local people, from the maintenance of the park to the cleaning of the park to the concessions to the everything else. And so you can make this argument one way or another, and we believed, and after some discussion, I think we had general agreement, that a safe way of capturing sort of the economic impact of the fact that you have to spend money to get in the park and you spend more money while you're there is to actually ask it and to report it. We do break it out so that if you have strong feelings one way or another, you can look at the difference. Yes?
Seems that the lodging and camping accommodations number is quite low. Does that mean they're staying with family and friends?
A fairly large number of them were, 15%. I think if we went back a couple of slides.
71% stayed in paid accommodations.
Per person.
I wonder if they count, like if they stay in a 3-month rental,
Yeah.
like if they
Not
count,
now.
if you asked me that question, if I would count that, are you staying, in paid lodging because you paid it for 3 months? You might say no.
Right. It's interesting because it's a different audience to interview. In one sense, you're trying to interview the total population of people attending, well, you're at least trying to sample the total population of people attending these games by being at both parks for that full month. On the other hand, it's a very different group of people, and completely understanding exactly what those differences are would require an enormous amount of sort of follow-up and analysis. But you're right, it looks different than what we see in sort of the general seasonal reporting. My tendency is to believe it. It's self-reported. It's based on 1,200 interviews. It's an interesting question why it differs.
Well, if you get people staying with family and friends, it's going to
Right.
drive that.
Exactly. Right.
After that could be.
Direct dollar impact, all visitor spending. Visitors attending spring training in Lee County spent an estimated $69 million in the area. Again, lodging and camping accommodations, $18.5 million, food and beverage, $14.5, and then it trails off to a fairly large shopping number, ground transportation, and so forth. Again, out-of-park total, $57 million almost, in-park total, $12 million for a grand total, direct spending, $68 million, broken down between JetBlue Park and CenturyLink in the following way: 36 for JetBlue and $32 million for CenturyLink Sports Complex. Employment impact, all visitors, 940 jobs were directly supported by spring training attendees in Lee County, with a total impact of 1,315 supported jobs. And again, 940, if we take just a look at direct expenditures and say, how many jobs are roughly supported by those direct expenditures, that number ends up being 940. But what we know in all of the economic impact work that we do is that that dollar of direct expenditures rattles around in the economy for a while and has many other rounds of effect. So the total number of jobs supported by spring training would be more like 1,300. Attendees of spring training games directly supported $21.6 million in Lee County household incomes, with additional rounds of spending supporting a total of $35 million in household income. Again, just another way of looking at the same thing. Direct household income, $22 million supported by spring training direct spending. And now we're looking at household income as opposed to expenditures. Okay, so we're sort of extrapolating the model data to, well, what does this mean for what people are taking home? And 35 for total impact, 35 million in household income. Summary, spring training plays a significant role in bringing visitors to Lee County. Remember, half of them came just for spring training. 2/5 of attendees surveyed report they only visit Lee County during spring training. Half say the primary reason they came to Fort Myers area for this trip was to attend spring training. Spring training has a strong positive impact on the Lee County economy. Travelers attending spring training spend nearly $69 million in the area while visiting. That's $12.1 million inside the park again, and $56 million outside the park. 85% of total dollars was spent by those attendees who indicate that spring training was the primary reason they came to Lee County. So a lot of that money is being brought here and spent here by those saying, yeah, I came for spring training. Summary, economic impact of these dollars spent by spring training attendees is significant. The $68.9 million spent by spring training attendees directly supports, again, 940 jobs, direct support, $21.6 million in household income, $2.5 million in local government revenues, and $4.8 million in state government revenues. So spring training is fun, it's cool, it's a great calling card, it's wonderful to say you have it, and it's a great engine of tourism here. And the research shows that. We've doubled down on what we observed a number of years ago, and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to do this with you. Any other questions or conversation about spring training? Jeff, anything you wanted to say? Tam?
Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you for the great information.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say a couple things because this is it. I wanted to say on behalf of all the people who work for me, including the gentleman here in Lee County who collected data on our behalf for the last decade or so, that we have been very privileged to work on behalf of Lee County. We've been thrilled to be here. A number of different people have worked on this project over the years, and we're very proud to have done what we think was a good job and to be able to work with all of you fine people. I also like leaving people with a little something extra, and this is very brief. It's a poem by Jimmy Stewart, so a lot of us are old enough to really know who that is. And I call this a cautionary tale for the hospitality industry. And I think that the cautionary tale would be that no detail is too small to pay attention to in our business. And we're not only have been your researchers, but for a decade, we think we've been among your biggest champions. Jimmy Stewart called this poem The Top Step in the Hotel in Hunin. The top step of the hotel in Hunin is mean, like the devil is mean. And it lies at the top of the other steps, so quiet, so still, so serene. But this top step has something quite special. A very ingenious device. It's half an inch higher than the other steps, well, a whole inch to be more precise. And it uses this inch as a weapon the guests of the place to harass. For when you reach the third floor of that hotel in Hunin, the top step trips you right on your ass. Now, I've had my share of knocks in the head, and I've felt enemy gunfire in war. But if you want my opinion of what's really bad, I'll be glad to give you the score. Of all the degrading, inhuman, mean things that I in my life have yet seen, the gross, most despicable one of them all is that top step in the hotel in Hunin. Thank you. It's been a great run. Appreciate working.
Glenn?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to talk to you a little bit right now about something we'd like to take a look at by way of a new branding initiative. I know you've had some individual conversations, just one-on-one with Tamara, but we can get into this a little bit more and have a conversation about it today. I just want to set up a brief presentation by Stuart from MMGY, and then with the team here, we can try to answer questions for you, et cetera. Just real quickly, the genesis of this really, it's been a long time in coming, longer ago than I'd like to think about at this moment when I worked for the Economic Development Office. The very first prospect I ever touched was a company called Somero Enterprises. And it was about 11-person corporate headquarters, small project, but we worked hard, we landed it. And what is really interesting about that is, although they have very few people working there, they make laser concrete leveling devices for commercial building pads. Well, they bring in scores of people every month to train on this equipment, and they bring them in for 1 to 2 weeks at a time from around the world. And so every year they literally bring hundreds and hundreds of visitors to our destination, and those people, of course, are housed in our hotels. They're in our restaurants every night. They use catering services for the breakfast and lunches during the training sessions themselves. And so right out of the gate, I started thinking about the intersection of sort of that world and travel and how that works. Not long thereafter, Miami-Dade undertook a really large campaign to market not only to the leisure tourist, but also to the business traveler. And I always thought that was pretty interesting and seemed like they did a good job. And so, again, some time ago, long before Tamara and I sat in the positions that we do now, we used to talk about this and these intersections and how we can collaborate, cross-pollinate between these worlds. So now we have this opportunity to sort of look at this, and so I asked the team to take a look at the concept of a really comprehensive destination brand that could speak to, again, the leisure tourist, the business traveler, the prospective workforce member who might be looking at our community as a possibility to relocate, et cetera. Obviously, the sports tourism world as well. And so Tamara and Pamela and Jeff started really doing some research on this. We've watched, for instance, the Pure Michigan campaign from afar and how wildly successful that has been. And of course, that started with the tourism world and grew into what we think of as a little bit more traditional economic development world. I mean, our team mashes that all together. I mean, this is all economic development, right? But we've seen how that can work. And so they did some research, and we can talk about that more afterwards. And I think what they'll tell you is where we came back is, well, first of all, we probably should look at the brand every once in a while regardless, right? I mean, we've had our current brand for some time, and regardless of this particular initiative, we just need to take a look at that periodically. But with respect to this specifically, you know, they've gone out, they've talked to a lot of people, they've looked at what other communities are doing, and they're saying, okay, while this is not yet the norm, taking this kind of approach, it's absolutely the wave of the future. It just offers so many synergies, and you know, you're in the marketplace all the time with a common unifying theme. It just, one thing amplifies another, and so this is where destinations are headed. I think maybe that's enough of a setup to ask Stuart to come up and just talk a little bit about his firm's experience in this space, what they've done this a few times, and talk to us a little bit about what a process could look like if we undertake this initiative. So, Stuart?
Thank you very much. You know, branding is one of those words that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. What I always like to say is where you go says a lot about you. We define ourselves by the places we go. It's the stories we bring back, but it is that cachet that people think. We do a study, the Portrait of American Travelers, and where you go tells people a lot about who they think you are. There's a lot of connotations that go with that. But as destinations, we don't always make that easy because we don't really clearly define what's different or unique about ourselves. I'm lucky enough to do this all around the world, and I always go to destinations and say, what makes this place unique? What makes it different? And here's what I've heard from every single destination that we've ever worked with. Number one, every place has the friendliest people in the world. Every single place. They've also got the best restaurants. Got the best shopping, an amazing arts community, and most of the time the arts community is underappreciated. Like this one, when our In Search Construction project here is finished, it's going to be a game changer. And then finally, we have something for everyone. And when I always say it's the bane of my existence, something for everyone, because we've seen that all the time. From this to this, we've got it all. But what they realize is they're talking to the room and hoping you believe these things rather than talking to one person. And so what we have the ability to do is create brands that have individual conversations with people, not talking to hopefully everyone. The thing is, every destination is going to talk about their restaurants. They're going to talk about their shopping and their arts community, and that's great. But they're doing it in a way that makes us all the same. I always say that in trying to tell how a destination is different, they use a criteria that makes them all the same. So what we need to be able to do is define what makes us truly unique as a destination, and then talk about it in a way that only we can talk about. Destination brands start at home. If it doesn't resonate with you who live here, it's never going to resonate from people that come to visit or want to relocate. People all say that they want authenticity when they travel. They're looking for experiences over things. So if it doesn't resonate, they don't want to feel like they're an outsider. They want to feel like they're a part of something. So it has to resonate and be a part of who we are here for it to resonate with someone outside. So we do that in a process we call hemispheres. It's taking the left side, the rational, and the emotional side and bringing them together, because those are how we make decisions. There's the facts and figures, and then there's the emotional side. So we start out with the brand analysis, and a large portion of that is the stakeholder interviews. We're going to sit down with individuals, which we've already started some, but also groups of people, because we want everybody to feel like they have a say and a part of this brand. Because again, if it represents everyone, it needs to have all of their buy-in, all of their feelings about that. We look around, and then won't go into everything about this, but we'll also do research. We'll talk to past guests, potential guests. We'll do surveys, online surveys in different countries that are feeder markets. We'll also have a resident survey so that there's a full 360 view, that a lot of input, and then we'll create what we call the brand architecture with a positioning, essence, the values, the promise, and experience. So it gives us a roadmap of where we go and how we make decisions. We actually use the brand values as a criteria of what's right for the brand moving forward. But I thought it'd be easier to kind of show you an example of the brands that we've created. And one of them is Cleveland. And we created this brand about 5 years ago. Interesting thing is, it's changed a little bit, quite a bit actually, but first time I was in Buenos Aires giving a speech, and I said I'm working with Cleveland. And I heard some audible gasp, and I walked up to the front of the stage and I said, you know Cleveland? And this lady said, it's the armpit of America. And it's like, well, we've got a lot of work to do. So I showed this next video to a group just like this the very first time in Cleveland. I'll show you what it was.
My first stop in America was in Cleveland, Ohio. Anybody from Cleveland by chance? Anybody? They made me feel at home in Cleveland, so I had to escape again. Now, I make fun of Cleveland because everybody makes fun of Cleveland. Is that correct? I mean, every country has one city people make fun of. In Russia, we used to make fun of Cleveland.
We have safely landed in Cleveland.
Jim Brown, everybody, one of the greatest football players of all time. You retired at 29 so you could get out of Cleveland, all right?
Has to say all shucks, 'cause Cleveland doesn't rock, no, it totally sucks.
You like it? You think Cleveland's cool? I mean, I never heard anybody say, I'm going to Cleveland on vacation.
So, true story. I showed this at a board meeting, a crowded room, and the lights came on, and they were not happy. They were not happy with me for this. And I said, this isn't a joke. I don't think it's a joke. But what you have to understand is what the sentiment, what perception is out there. And that if you don't realize that you're in a hole, you'll never climb out of the hole. and that Cleveland couldn't talk like any place else because it had so much baggage with it. For years and years and years, Cleveland was trying to be something that they thought people wanted, instead of just being themselves. Or to steal a quote, I always love this, it's like, some things haven't changed about Cleveland, by the way, but steal this quote all the time by Oscar Wilde, be yourself, everybody else is already taken. Cleveland was already the best Cleveland. It's getting better, but it's uniquely Cleveland. It didn't need to compare itself with Chicago or other places. It needed to be Cleveland and do something that only Cleveland could do. So I'm going to show you what ended up being some of the commercials we created for them, but it's got brand anthem. It kind of tells you what the brand is all about. So it was all about Cleveland embracing who it was. Is that brand right for Lee County? No, but it's finding uniquely the essence of what Cleveland is. And you know, people know that it has the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's got the 10 Beard Award-winning chefs, but it's not the stuff. It's the emotional connection that people have to Cleveland that has changed things. So we did create campaigns, and as you'll see, they're not like typical campaigns because you couldn't just say, come to Cleveland, because people weren't going to just come to Cleveland. You had to give them an emotional reason why and talk about what we share. We also started extending the brand, though, and making it, this became the logo, but it was 6 months before it became the logo, we started selling it in local shops to get people to buy into it. So that by the time that it became a logo, they thought it was just already a part of who they were. It's become one of the biggest sellers in the city. The logo's now being embraced. It's on, this looks like it's going to stay for quite a while. It's on city things. So they've made complete 20-foot long signs that people stand by in 5 different areas at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And one of the coolest things is they've actually embraced it. Now the Cleveland Cavaliers are wearing is their city uniforms this year, the tourism logo, which is now embraced as just Cleveland's signature. It's called the city uniform. It's supposed to embolden and represent the entire city, and this is what they chose. So that's great, and it's all fun, but did it work? So independent study was the campaign generated an $109.5 million in incremental visitor expenditures, which translates to $2.9 million in local tax revenue. More importantly, and I think this is the most important, for every dollar spent on advertising, visitors spent 195. We're talking about, Tam was talking about Pure Michigan. I think they set a benchmark at about 88, 90. So it's really worked. And then something kind of interesting happened. We also then asked people who had seen the campaign and seen the work about how did it make you feel about Cleveland as a good place to live, to start a career, to start a business, to attend college, or to retire. This is what it was if they hadn't seen the advertising. Once they were exposed to it, it changed perception. At the end of the day, what we want to do is change perception and attract people. Economic development, what we're talking about, is attracting and retaining talent. So an emotional connection can bring those two together. Because we found out that it had worked, what we found out by we talked to over 80 CEOs in Cleveland, and that they were using these messages and using these materials to attract talent. So we've now included them and started talking an entire message to the business sector as well.
We are all Clevelanders.
We wear it like a badge of honor.
It defines who we are and how we see the world. We never followed anyone else's rules. We made our own.
And we've shown the world
that when we work together, we can accomplish anything. We have the opportunity
to come together again
as one voice
to let the world know that Cleveland is much more than a destination for tourism.
We are a destination for industry,
talent, and students alike.
Cleveland is the destination, period. Now is the time to tell our story.
One city,
one voice.
Because we may not all be alike,
but we come from the same place. Make no mistake.
Make no mistake.
Make no mistake. We are all Clevelanders.
So taking this entire message across all sectors and strengthening it, and so that when someone sees an ad, when somebody sees a message, they don't see it as a business person or as a tourist. They see a message as a person that connects with them emotionally. So one destination, one brand, one voice. We believe that we can do the same thing by taking the three entities here and coming up with an emotional connection that draws us all together, that strengthens all three of the pillars. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, just field any questions or try to, if there's any discussion.
Tony?
This process, how long, when you start it and, I guess, has it been approved to start? And if we do start, where's the timeline and probably what's the cost?
Yeah, good question. So we haven't started because we obviously want input and feedback and understand where everybody's thinking is on this. We do have approval in the sense that we can absorb it in our current budgets. It would be a partnership between the EDO, VCB, sports, so it can be paid for. Really, I think we're putting the entire process to include, well, before we say the price, maybe, Stuart, you could talk about the process a little bit, what it includes, and then we can talk about what that all costs.
Sure. Processing. So we really do start with a discovery where we're going to sit down with the three entities and find out what are the similarities, what are the differences, what are the goals, what are the KPIs in that we really want, how do we see success? Then we're going to go and do stakeholder sessions, and that's where I really believe is the thing that sets this apart. And I don't mean stakeholder sessions where we're just going to ask typical questions, but we're really going to ask people why it's not, you're a businessman, why do you do business? It's not those kind of things. It's what's special about this place. And then there will be questions for specific people. But I think that we need to be looking at local stakeholders, also some of the people outside of the market that do that. We're then also going to look at what are the messages that we're sending out, and are they consistent? We're going to look at the product assessment and where that stacks up. A communications audit, a subset analysis where that's our portrait of American travelers, where we can find out a lot about what people feel about this destination compared to the rest of Florida. And then, like I said, we're going to do qualitative and quantitative surveys. We're going to go to 3 cities that are feeder markets and talk to people who have and haven't been here. What's the different sentiments and perception? We're going to do online surveys in the United States and countries like UK, Germany, Canada. And then we're going to talk to create a resident survey so that we can hear everybody's voice. Because I believe that when people are allowed to be brought into the process, they feel it's theirs. And like I said, it has to resonate locally. It has to make people feel like, yes, that's who we are. So then when we create that, we go through that process, it leads us into our brand architecture, which there will be what we call the brand book that is full of the essence, the values, the promise, the experience, the voice, and the anthem, so that all the partners know how to get involved with the brand and how we can speak the same voice. So it's a very tangible thing that then we will then also be training different people on how to speak in that brand voice.
Those time windows, like you say, that's quite a bit of time and process, I would think.
It does, and Tammy, you might want to talk to.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Well, goals. We'd like to do it this fiscal year if we can get it done. That's our goal. So that doesn't leave us a lot of time. When I talked to Stuart yesterday about that, that's tight, 6.5 months from now. But we're going to strive towards that. But, it's important. I think the first part of this, those conversations are the most important parts of it. We got to have really good local community conversations, and getting those in place, making sure we get people engaged is going to be a really important component. After that, I think it'll go pretty much like clockwork, right? But this
that is the part that takes the most time, scheduling.
And as part of that, basically, will that drive our marketing? Will that change our marketing? There's tour travel and there's business travel. And I mean, is that going to change some of our marketing strategies, would you think, or possible?
Potentially. I mean, I think we've got to, I hate to say exactly where we're going to land, because I think the process is going to dictate where we land. And Stuart, help me out. You've done this. This is, a little bit new for me, but.
That's right. Somebody's asked me the question before of, what do you think? And I try not to think until we get the input. Because I'm not, in the case of Cleveland, we started going after a completely different market, a younger market. And the reason why was because we found out after talking and doing research that you could spend all the money you had to the audience that you've been talking to, and you wouldn't have made a change in the sentiment. But a younger audience didn't have the baggage. They just looked at Cleveland and said, it's got all the things that I want to have. So it changed, it shifted. But what we found out was after the shift in our marketing strategy, it also raised the older audience, because the sentiment had changed with them as well. Yes.
Brant, go ahead.
Stuart and I spent about an hour and a half yesterday talking about some of these things, and after I left, Stuart, I talked to several people, and one of the things that they were quick to say to me, if it ain't broken, why fix it? And they feel like, we're a leader in the state of Florida. I wondered how far behind we are. Is the rest of the state, the other counties looking at doing this?
Well, it's a very good question. I'll answer it a couple different ways. We also rebranded Vancouver, British Columbia not too long ago. And they had experienced, I think the past 5 years, record visitation every year, year over year. But it wasn't to them about where they had been. It was how do they continue to set themselves up for success. I think that you're very progressive. I was giving an interview last week, and I said I think this is a very progressive idea. The idea of Cleveland started as a tourism brand that everybody else embraced. Doing this from the very start is something that I don't think everybody thinks of doing, and I think it is where the industry is heading, because being a total destination is what people are, that's how we digest our messaging anymore. We don't separate it and say this is a tourism message, this is an economic development message. It's input that we're getting, and I think that doing it this way from the very start is a very progressive way that keeps you ahead and builds on your success.
And I think, just context, many of you were at this table when we went from Lee Island Coast to the beaches of Fort Myers and Sanibel. And the Lee Island Coast was a successful brand. But we had to, but it became a challenge when we had the internet and people were looking and searching, because guess what? It was a marketing name, not a destination name. And so it became a real challenge for us from a marketing standpoint. We're hoping that what we do here enhances the brand, right? We're gonna be more precise about who we're speaking to, who we appeal to, who we really are at the end of the day. Highlighting what's unique and different about our area. That's the challenge of the VCB, has always been the challenge of the VCB. Fort Lauderdale's got beaches, St. Pete's got beaches, Sarasota's got arts and culture, we've got arts and culture. We've got great restaurants, so does Miami. I mean, we have to compete against all of those people, and not just in the state of Florida, in the world, what makes us stand out, and continuing to hone that message. I mean, we've never stopped doing that, and I look at this as one more step in that process of continuing to hone our message.
Fran, I think one example I'd want to add by way of answering your question, what are other destinations in Florida doing, and that would be Tampa Bay. And I don't know, maybe Pamela could speak to that.
Maybe, Amanda?
I think it's a good example of the kinds of things we're starting to see.
So I would like to say that to your question, Fran, are we the first to do this, or is anyone else doing this? Tamara, Jeff, and I had the opportunity to attend City Nation Place in New York City last, was it October?
May.
Okay.
Not even a year.
Yeah. And I think that it's been happening more and more on an international level, and it's starting to happen more here in the U.S. We actually ran into colleagues from Sarasota and Tampa Bay at this conference, and I think people are, everyone, and since we've started talking about this, I've received phone calls, what are you guys doing? How are you doing it? Please keep us in the loop on how it all works. And it's really an opportunity for placemaking, not only for tourism, but for economic development as well as sports. Taking all of those things that make us a great place and trying to come up with a brand that fits, if that's the best way to say that.
So you see the example. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill.
Well, I was just going to tell a quick story because I was a disbeliever. We hired a corporate coach to take us to the next level in our company, and he kept preaching, what's your brand promise? What's your brand? So we went through this exercise, 12 months. And it probably would have been 8 months, but I kicked and screamed because I didn't want to take the medicine. And coming out of that, we went in saying, well, we're 80% families. We focus on kids and families. We came out of it found that we're 50% couples and 50% families. And we were missing a whole demographic that we should be focusing on, which is the couples, and, do we have more entertainment at night, and et cetera, et cetera. But after we came out of it, it really gave clarity to our marketing team, all the way down to our room attendants to saying what we are, what is our brand promise, who we are, and what we're going. And then it makes the marketing so much easier of just, this is what you look and feel when you see those ads. And I applaud you guys for going this direction, but it is the right thing.
Johnny?
I think, too, it's a strategic move. You want to be looking 4 to 5 years out, where you're going to be. And I think we've done I've loved what we did when we made the shift out of the Lee Island coast. My God, that was an easy call. This is probably a little different for us to kind of comprehend. And we came out of our strategic plan reading a book called Mindset, and it's about a growth mindset, and this is the type of thing that you want to be doing.
Just sharing the example of Tampa Bay, what they're doing. So they are using an almost identical mark for their economic development office, Make It Tampa Bay, and Visit Tampa Bay for their tourism office. And they're really focused on that icon, that cross key icon. In fact, they even have a big giant, one of those icons outside their office. Pamela and I took our picture by it when we visited them recently because, icons are the Nike swoosh. I mean, think about icons and what they mean to brands. And so, we understood that. In fact, that's one of the reasons we changed the logo, several years ago. We needed something iconic in that logo. That was us. And so at the end of the day, we just wanted to show you a couple of examples of how cross-branding is working in the community. Amanda, would you switch to the next one? So similarly, and I think everybody's heard about Pure Michigan, and if you haven't, then you must not own a television or radio because they've spent a lot of money on marketing. But you see how the top one is the tourism office, the middle one is the economic development office, and the bottom one is their sports effort around Michigan. So you see the 3 different logos, but again, that same message, Pure Michigan. And so, we're not saying the logos are going to be the same. I want to be very clear here. I'm just showing you examples of how it's worked in other destinations. Where we land depends on where we collectively think we need to land.
But it's also your consumers and what they...
That's right. They have a big play in that.
It'll be what the consumers see us at.
And again, we're looking at 3 key markets that we're going to do those tryout interviews in. And, it's an important component of it. My intention is to be at every single one of those interviews because I want to hear what those guests are saying, those potential visitors, and the ones who haven't come and the ones who have come. What are they saying about us? What do they know about us? What does that mean to our objectives going forward? We've spent a lot of energy on data, and always have, but, lookalike markets and all those things that we can recreate that help us continue to advance our effort to continue to attract a healthy a number of visitors to the destination. As you know, a few years ago, we really shifted our focus to spend over quantity. We wanted the right guests that could afford to come to our destination and enjoy it and spend effectively over huge numbers of people. I think we've been really effective at that. And, we're going to continue to hone that message and find there literally is, it's like today's Valentine's Day, right? There's someone for everyone. Well, there's some destination that's for everyone too. This isn't the right destination for every single potential visitor out there. But we want to make sure that we get the ones that it is right for.
Connie?
What are you looking for us today? I mean, I do still want to know kind of a budgeted number. You say you have it in budget. I'd like to know that. And what are you looking for us today, for approval? Or, I mean, do you want to vote? Or, I mean, I don't know what's going on. But I'd like to hear the number just for this.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and let me just say, the consumer interviews that Tamara's talking about in the 3 markets, we're looking at Minneapolis, Boston, and Indianapolis in particular. So, obviously, a lot of legwork to do in terms of the community meetings, the out-of-market interviews, the surveys, and then the brand architecture itself. Rounding up, we're looking at a $300,000 price tag, and that would be evenly split between essentially the county's general fund for the Economic Development Office and the VCB. So if you all wanted to vote by way of making a recommendation, we welcome that. If you just want to talk about it and come to consensus, however, whatever you think appropriate.
Well, the chairman wants to do it with you guys. I mean,
Well, I'd like to hear you guys' input. I mean, if you want to move forward, I think it's a great benefit for these people with the, Lee County paying for half of it. So we're all gonna come out good on the end of this. I think at the end of the day, hopefully a year from now we'll look back and say, thank goodness we did this. So if you really want to make a motion, so we at least direct staff at a later date to go forward with this.
And if I could make one clarification, Mr. Chairman, on the in this partnership, I want to be clear that the Horizon Foundation that raises marketing monies is contributing toward that as well. So,
I mean, I think, we need to, keep the motion going. I just wanted to know the price, just, ballpark, and I understand it's a ballpark, those things. There's a lot of legwork involved, but I like what I heard today, and I like the diagnostic of going after it the way they're talking about it. I think that's very important. So I'm all in favor, of going forward.
I agree.
You want to make a motion? Do we want to make a motion at all? You go ahead, Billy, make a motion.
So, 300,000, so my motion would be to move forward with the rebranding of Lee County and the three entities at a budget of the 300,000.
I'll second it. Any other discussion? Any public comment on this item? Anybody still here that want to speak? Okay, we'll come back. Any other discussion? Any objection?
I'm a little nervous of us putting the 300,000 on the table when I don't think we really.
Well, it's not our 300, there's half of it.
But I'm a little nervous about a vote yet. I don't think we know enough, but I'll go along with it. That's what you all want to do. But I think it's a little early to, I don't know. I didn't expect this part today, I guess. I'm okay with that. I think we need to be looking. But there are a lot of people out there that are saying it's not broke. So.
Well, if this helps at all, that is absolutely part of the conversation. There can't be any predetermined outcome for this process. If at the end of the day you got to a point where you said there's more detriment to making a move than staying with what we have, then you got to be receptive to that too.
Right.
I don't know if that helps, but
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, that does.
Rob?
Let's say there's a lot of studies out there in the $150,000 price range, which is what they're asking for tourist tax dollars for today, to do some comprehensive studies to find out what our customers, potential customers, people in those key markets are looking for. And at the very least, no matter how well we're doing at any given time, we have to continue to be in tune with what that potential customer is looking for. And so it's a worthwhile move that direction, whether it turns out to be anything at the end of the day or not, in my take.
You look at too, Fran, when we update websites all the time, and this is kind of like a whole blowing it up, and doesn't mean that you're not going to recognize certain parts of the website when it comes back, but it's going to be much more functional based on the research that will help draw and keep our customer base really, enhance it, I would think.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tony.
That's where I'm going. And it's going to take a year to get there even, so I think
it's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, so.
Fran, your concerns are part of the record. We already called for a motion. We have a second. So.
No, I'm going to vote for it, yeah.
Any objection? No objection? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for the information, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. I'm going to Cleveland. In July.
Glenn, you have something else?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just for council information, you see a new face over here in the corner. This is John Talmadge. I know many of you have met him or even worked with him, but for those of you who haven't, John has been named the director of our Economic Development Office. John has a lot of experience in this area. He worked in New York City for community development. He was the deputy director of the City of New Orleans economic development efforts. He was CEO of Social Compact, which is a demographic and community development firm. He's worked for the City of Fort Myers, lots of other great things, brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to our operation. So we look forward to integrating him into all of our efforts and connecting him with you. John, I don't know if you have anything you want to say.
No, I'm just very excited to be on board. It's a great team with Pam and Jeff and Pam, and led by Glenn, and I'm glad that you're the commissioner and the chair this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But don't forget, it's New Orleans, so we need it for hurricane season. We'll talk to you about evacuations and hurricane shelters. No, welcome aboard, John. We're very excited about having you here, so thank you.
And Jeff just reminded me, I guess the second part of that is, and we've communicated this to you, but it's good to say it in public, Pamela, of course, coming back in...
We're happy.
So I know you'll all be thrilled to have her back more full-time, and she has assented to take the role of playing this deputy director position for all of our entities so we can keep this integration going and tie the groups together. Obviously, it's incumbent on us to be very careful not to overtax her, so we're really cognizant of that. But
got her back.
Thank you, Pamela. Yes.
We're happy to have you back. We thought you wanted to go to fleet maintenance or something. Sustainability maybe or something. So glad to have you back. So thank you. Okay. We'll go ahead and start Tony. Tony, you have anything for us today?
Nothing. Glad to see some good weather coming our way and let the tourists come down. We're ready.
Keep staying cold up north, all right?
Yeah, keep it cold up there.
I just hope everybody has a great season. Happy Valentine's to everybody.
So,
Great season. Happy Valentine's.
Colleen?
Two things. We have recently changed the date of our Chrysalis Awards. There was an opportunity for the hotel to secure a nice piece of business, but we had all their space. So we have shifted the Chrysalis Awards to June 14th. Everything else still stands. The nominations are in. We are now accepting and clarifying the applications and making sure everything's correct so that when they get judged, we're ready to go. So the trade show is being sponsored by the Lee County chapter of the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association this year. So we have opened that up. So if you wanted to, we'll have about 40 or 42 spots open for trade show tables if you're interested in doing that. The second thing is we are very fortunate on the 20th, right? February 20th, Carol Dover is coming down. She runs the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association. She's coming down from Tallahassee, and she's coming in, one, to swear in the board, but more importantly, to talk about to give us a legislative update on what's happening in regards to restaurants and hotels in Tallahassee, what we can expect to see this year in legislation and maybe on in the ballot in 2020. So there's some good conversations. I would highly recommend that to sign up for that luncheon on the 20th. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thanks.
Thank you. Fran?
You've got your RSW and the air service update, I think, and the airport's going great guns, as the commissioner will tell you, and getting ready to do a whole lot of remodeling and stuff out there, so it's really all good stuff. Pam will tell you that too. But the other thing that I want to say is I'm getting a lot of pressure, and I've spoken to Tam about it, but I just want to bring it to your attention because I'm going to look for Mr. Lavender if he's still in the room before I leave. Our Matanzas Past Preserve out there on Fort Myers Beach, you know, this group has spent a lot of money putting in the boardwalks and the things out there. And since Irma, you know, part of it's closed. The boardwalks are just closed down. They got big barricades, and so our tourists that come back there, sometimes you got to walk through the mud to get even out to the back bay where we have our launches and everything. So it seems redundant that we've spent all that money, and there's over half of it we can't even use, and it's brought to my attention that it might not get fixed for 2 years. So I just want to bring it to your attention today. I'm going to speak to Parks and Rec and see what their plan is, if we can bring it back to this group, you know, and see what we can do about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, and thank you again, and thank you about the good information about the airport. And I want to mention real quick, we had a Port Authority meeting a few months ago, and Carol, I think you're still here. Maybe in the future we'll get some of the airport to come and give us a quick overview of what's going on at the airport with all the new, I think, Pamela, you were at that meeting that day, and all the renovations going on at the airport in the future. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars out there with a new facelift on the front, at the front ticket counters. Inside, we're expanding the back of the airport farther out. Some new gates being added, some new common areas, restaurants. So maybe there'll actually be putting all this, the security all centralized in the middle of the airport, instead of having 3 different gates, 3 different areas of checkpoints with TSA. You can have one central checkpoint, so it's a really great expansion. It's going to help people, the visitors. I mean, we have a great airport now. I think it's increased the ease of people coming through the airport. It's going to create some more revenue for the airport, too, with the services going to have all the restaurants behind the gates, so people will use them more. So maybe in the future, in the next few months, we'll have some in the airport come.
15-minute presentation.
Yeah, I mean, it's
really
going to be beautiful, and it's already beautiful now, but we're going to expand the back of the airport, and it's really going to help all our visitors, so thank you.
Amazing.
Pam? Great. Well, anything else? We'll go ahead and adjourn. So, adjourn. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Hey, have a good couple.
Hang on to these, they could be worth something in 50 years.
There was no parking.
Yeah, they'll be changed.